So the first thing you were asked to do with this graph was to look through and make sure it had some of the communication standards that we expect from just good data visual design. That is, we wanted a title, axes labels, and a legend. This also helps us make sure that we understand what the graph is showing before we go to write our alt text later. So good practices for reading a graph and interacting with the graph regardless. So the first thing we're going to look at is this title, High Times for TikTok. So we're going, okay, so we're talking about TikTok. Interesting. We get a little subtitle here, Global Monthly Downloads for Selected Social Apps on the Android and Apple stores from 2020 in millions. So they're really telling us here that the data that we're being introduced to. We're looking at global downloads, monthly, and Android and Apple apps in millions. Perfect. We now know what we're going to be interacting with. As we look down, we want to look at these axes labels. So we see our axes labels. We have a frequency on the left, right, from 0 up to 80. And we know this is about our global monthly downloads in millions, right, from those two stores, Android and Apple stores. We're going, okay, that could be 80 million in terms of a number of monthly downloads. That's huge. And then we also can see we have this other axes label here at the bottom. We've got March, April, May, June, July, and August. These are those months of 2002, so we can kind of see what's happening over time. Cool. And then the very last thing we have is our legend, because we have three different colors displayed in this graph. And my legend here is showing me which of these social media apps. So it appears that we are comparing TikTok to Instagram and Facebook. That's sort of the reason we would have all three, and we can see them within each month. We have all three of them. Cool. Great. Now, if we wanted to go a bit further, this graph gives us more information, right? First off, let's go back to that high times for TikTok. We can see that for each and every month, the highest bar, the largest bar, is always this dark blue one. It's always the TikTok bar, right? And every single month, the tallest bar is TikTok. They also gave us some information here. It appears that they've highlighted some certain numbers. That seems important to me as a person interacting with this graph because I'm going, why would you give me these numbers? And specifically, why are you focusing on May and then August? So let's think a little bit as we move towards our accessibility, right? Our alt text that we're going to be writing. First, we need to determine what type of graph this is. So let me just bring in my alt text and let's talk about this. Boop. All right, so here is my alt text. I'm going to move that. I'm trying to make this alt text bigger. Wahaha. All right. So first and foremost, we need to talk about what type of display this is. This is a segmented bar chart. Now, I know we haven't necessarily spent a whole lot of time talking about this. There was one in our pre-activity, that reading graphs pre-activity, but otherwise, we haven't chatted about these yet. We're going to get to them a little bit later when we start talking about how to look for relationships between variables. But for now, segmented bar chart. If you wrote bar chart, I'm pretty happy because that's what we've talked about at this point in the class. We need to put down what data is being summarized here. So monthly downloads of social media apps from March 2020 to August 2020. Now, if you didn't put in those months, I'm not worried about it, but we definitely needed something about monthly downloads in social media apps. You could have given more information. You could have just copied this entire sentence here that was in that like subtitle, and I think you would have been good for what was being displayed. It's a little wordy, but there's a lot being displayed here. And then the hardest part of this is the reason that this graph is included. Now, the title gives us a hint to that reason, right? As we discussed, the high times for TikTok. So when I wrote my purpose here, and there's no saying that this is the right answer, but this is how I did. I wrote that TikTok had far more downloads than Instagram or Facebook. So I'm making it clear which social media apps are being compared, and I am giving that takeaway of that TikTok is getting more downloads than the other two. But I really wanted to highlight why did the people who made this graph show these numbers? I don't want to write out the numbers themselves, because that's not going to be a very accessible thing to do in terms of somebody listening to this being read to them. But the purpose of writing these numbers, as I can see it, is we went from this huge difference, almost twice as many downloads for TikTok than Instagram, and more than twice as many as for Facebook in May, to almost getting to comparable numbers in August. So to me, that takeaway was that difference is shrinking over time. So something about that. If you didn't have that, that's fine. But this is what the main takeaways of this graph to me are. We see TikTok has way more downloads than Instagram or Facebook, but what started out really high is starting to level off as maybe they've saturated the market, or whatever that might be. So there's my alt text for this. Hopefully yours looked somewhat similar.